Formula 1 24 is hotting up to be a battle of Max and the McLarens. Max was unbelievable in qualifying. You know, one of the great laps of the century.
You put yourself in the position of Max. What would you have done, David? What difference would you have done?
Defended and fought as hard as I could to try and win the Grand Prix.
And did you see anything wrong there?
Well, look, in this modern era...
Off the fence, David, I'm a world champion, but if you want to fight with me, make sure the gloves are in the right position, because I'm never going to make it easy for you.
Attention all anchors for ad-free listening, bonus episodes, exclusive merchandise, and the chance to join a future recording of the podcast. You can now sign up for the FFS Club. Just head to our website, f1forsuccess.com.
Hello and welcome to Formula for Success. I'm David Coulthard, and joining me for breakfast on a lovely morning here in London is Eddie Jordan.
We're all alive and well, David.
Too early for that growl.
Oh, never too early for a good growl.
Well, actually, thinking about it, given that you've had a little medical hiccup there a few weeks ago, it's good to hear you growl.
Well, thank you for that. And anyone who was thinking that perhaps they might see more of me underground than above ground, well, they have to live and fight on for another day.
Yeah, we're very glad of that. So we're going to be giving our thoughts on the Austrian Grand Prix and all the latest news in Formula 1 in a moment. But first, EJ, we're both here in London this week because it's the British Grand Prix. Yeah. I've got a pretty busy week. Starting from right now, we're doing this first thing Monday morning. How's your week looking?
Well, it's ridiculously busy, as you would expect. British Grand Prix time. I mean, for me, it's the most iconic part of living or being British or living in Britain or being lucky enough to be in London. Last night was the Kings of Leon, who will be playing at the Grand Prix, of course, on the Thursday. And DC, you and I are supporting them in our podcast, which is a live podcast.
That's right. But anyway, it'll be 5 p.m, actually, for those who are listening to this now.
Well done, DC.
You can meet us on the main stage at around 5 p.m.
Great. But before that, Kings of Leon were on last night, and you could hear it basically throughout London. It was amazing. I was actually playing at a small little venue with Luca, the Robbers, for the Spanish tennis players, because they're all here in Wimbledon. And of course, then Wimbledon goes into the British Open Championship, and which I think is in Troon. And, it's an iconic, it's the most sporting, fun time to be in London is this particular time.
It is indeed. Well, thank you for asking about my week. It's starting rather, with a celebration of life, yes. Which will be, I'm down at McLaren this evening. They're very kindly hosting on the main boulevard in their incredible Norman Foster designed building. They are hosting a memorial for Gil de Ferran, and we covered in one of our earlier podcasts in the new year just who Gil was. For those who are listening for the first time, a former teammate of mine from way back in 1990, married to a former secretary to Eddie, Angela.
My first ever PA.
There you go. Angela Buckland, who became, of course, Angela de Ferran. And Gilles went on to have amazing success in America, winning the 500, winning the Champ Car Series. And I'm going to have the chance, in celebration of Gilles' life, to drive his winning Penske car around the lake.
Brilliant.
And then we'll be there with people who have been part of his journey, and we'll be doing a good old knees up to celebrate what the man meant.
Well, he was also part of, if you remember, one of the early editions of FFS. A nicer person you could never hope to wish to meet. I mean, this guy is a class act. Angie was a class girl, and I loved her very much, and she went off and married Gilles and had a great family. And this is an important, it's an emotional time. It'll be sadness, of course, but there will be real joy. And DC, I'm hugely proud of you, man, that you're going to do this, because you and him were great friends. And I think friends in life is one thing, but friends when one of the parties have departed is either more magnanimous. So I applaud you for that.
Yeah, well, I am a confessed Gilles addict, and I don't want a cure. Love the man. So we will also have the opportunity, not only will you and I be on the main stage at Silverstone doing our live podcast, but his daughter, will be up there. My goddaughter, Anna de Ferran, who's a DJ. She's writes her own music as well, performs her own music. She'll be doing a set on stage.
Fantastic.
Which is just a real great celebration. So I'm looking forward to that. And just want to come back on what you were saying there about we're opening or doing something with Kings of Leon. Do they actually know that, or have you just sort of concocted this in your own mind? And I'm going to find myself in a typical sort of EJ blagging moment.
No, here's my vision. I can see it.
No, but do they know it? That's my question.
Anchors, what I'm saying to you is, some years ago, we had Charlene Spiteri of Texas, and I took DC by the hand because he's shy. He's very shy in certain moments and in certain positions, but not very often is he shy. But he was shy, and he came on stage, and we played together. And my wish, if we could speak to the management of the Kings of Leon, they might have us on and playing a song with them, DC. How do you like that?
Well, so this sums you up perfectly. So you make a statement that we're opening for the Kings of Leon. You now have declared that you haven't discussed this with anybody.
No.
And look, Charlene Spiteri was very gracious in that as a fellow Scot, and somehow she likes you or some.
Oh, it's very easy to understand that.
Yeah, she just accepted us on stage. Things have moved on, Eddie. We can't just go on stage and expect not to get taken out by security. The Kings of Leon are very important people.
It's more difficult to say no than it is to say yes. People do not like saying no. You can't come on.
What? Whoever said it's more difficult saying no?
Well, I'm going to ask them, haven't I?
Yeah, but I have no problem saying no if I don't want to do something.
But it's easier to say yes than no. Come on.
Okay, in your world, that explains a lot. But I'm only going to go on stage with you if I see someone inviting us. I'm not doing what you did last time, which is you took me by the hand, walked me on.
Now you
milked the crowd.
Why are you becoming so precious? You know you absolutely adore this. You'll be first up there.
I respect professionalism. And don't judge me.
Can we move on? Because this is becoming very tedious.
Okay, well, let's move on to what we've just seen, actually, the Austrian Grand Prix.
Yeah.
I had a wonderful time there. You weren't on site, but sun was shining. We had, I think, a very entertaining sprint race. Lando got stuck into Max, then, Oscar Piastri took advantage of that. So we had a nice little battle. Teed us up for the main Grand Prix. Max was unbelievable in qualifying. One of the great laps of the century. And then we're watching the race thinking, well, he's got 6-7 seconds. He's just controlling it to the end. Final pit stop, bit of a slow one for Red Bull. Then we find out, because the track temperature's changed, instead of going with a new hard, they go with a used medium. Lando pulls out a new set of mediums, and suddenly he comes out the pitch 2 seconds behind him, and it was game on. And I can imagine you would be prancing around like the leprechaun that you are, going, come on, have a go, get stuck in there. He did, but then they ended up having contact. So what was your whole vision and view on that particular battle and the outcome?
Well, first of all, it was hugely entertaining. And can we thank everyone? Because I think Austria, in fact, the last number of races have been fantastic. So we've really had an upsurge in real performance in terms of what looked like being potentially incredibly boring race with 10 laps to go, 7 seconds in the lead or whatever it was. It was a Max show yet again. However, the pit stop has helped, and it made it possible for us to have the excitement that came very quickly immediately after that. However, there's a lot of people on the bandwagon and criticising Max for this, that and the other. But I would just say one thing, that he's a very, very young boy, Lando. He is an incredible talent and will be in the future. But one thing he has to learn, and what yesterday will have taught him, and that is Max is a fighter. He's a bear. And before you get in the ring with a bear, you make sure you're prepared for it. And to go one side and the other side and then play this, the actual incident itself could have been so easily avoided because the front wheel of Lando's car here hit the rear wheel of Max, and that was the cause of the initial puncture. So before I criticise or blame anyone, I've failed to understand why he got the penalty. the 10-second because I don't necessarily think...
Do you think it was more a racing incident?
Of course it was a racing incident. It's the natural thing for you to... You put yourself in the position of Max. What would you have done, David? What difference would you have done?
Defended and fought as hard as I could to try and win the Grand Prix.
And did you see anything wrong there?
Well, look, in this modern era...
Off the fence, David, did you see anything wrong there?
I thought it represented the sort of racing that I used to be part of.
Yes.
But the world has evolved where sometimes looking at people in the wrong way can upset them.
Really? Oh.
Why are you looking at me like that?
Well, the thing is, we grew up in an era when track limits, I mean, who ever heard such crap?
Oh,
I mean, I'm bored to death
limits.
with track limits.
Yeah.
So that's number one. And then you can't do this and you can't do that. When you're defending and you are in the lead, it's no different to the road rules. It's the person in front has the right of way. He has propelled himself to the front. He has made it either through qualifying or guile or racing speed or whatever. He's leading the Grand Prix. The guy behind has to find a way around it. And in my opinion, the two drivers touched each other at a place where, for example, Max has the ability to dive into the right-hand side, and naturally to make the corner, he has to move slightly over to the left to actually get the traction and stuff to exit the corner in a proper, fashionable way. So I'm sorry, I see it as a racing incident. I failed to see it.
Yeah, I think that the thing that we have to acknowledge is that moving under braking is something that could be incredibly dangerous. And there's been, I'm not sure it's a written rule word for word, but it's something along the lines of you're not allowed to crowd another car off the circuit is the way it's written. So the question comes, was at any point there not room for Lando and was he being pushed off the circuit? There's a big wide corner there. We've seen incidents between Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton there. I spun my own teammate Mika Hakkinen around there in 99. It's amazing how such a simple little corner can create so much controversy. But whether you're on the Max fence or on the Lando fence, I think what we can all acknowledge is we're talking about it. Formula 1 24 is hotting up to be a battle of Max and the McLarens, because Oscar Piastri got that second place on the sprint race. Again, picking up some good points in the main race itself. It's great, and we were talking about it in previous podcasts that Max and Lando have been very friendly. They do social things together.
Sure,
that is because they haven't gone wheel to wheel on a regular basis. Now they're in the situation where they're going wheel to wheel on a regular basis. I think that Lando's learning that if you're going to compete at that level, this is not about whether he's a quick driver. He is blindingly quick, brilliant, mascot for what it takes to be a professional racing driver. But Max is a street fighter, and if you're going to beat a street fighter, this is UFC. You've got to. Yes, you have to follow the rules, but it's going to hurt at a certain point.
Look, anyone who thinks this is new, cast your mind back to Lewis Hamilton all those years ago. Max has a DNA where I'm a quick driver, I'm a world champion, but if you want to fight with me, make sure the gloves are in the right position, because I'm never going to make it easy for you. I made a comment at Imola when I said, everyone's talking about another lap or two and Lando was by him. That was never going to happen because he has got big, wide shoulders and he's got elbows and he moves them out. Max is the top. And if you beat Max fair and square, you have every reason to be massively proud. And at the moment, this is all a learning curve for Lando. He's sitting back in his chair this morning thinking about what he did wrong here. And he came and left the circuit with no points. That is sad from that point of view, because he gave us massive entertainment. But he should also contemplate, how am I going to take on Max in the future? Because he's never going to make it easy. If you like, the gap between him and Max for the championship went up because of the fifth position,
absolutely.
10 points that he got.
Yep.
I've got to mention one other thing separately to this. I'm still not convinced from the onboard cameras that I've seen about Oscar why they penalised him that position in the qualifying. And just think about it. He was punched in the jaw for that. And yet he came by and he finished second. And don't underestimate, because I think in more recent races, it's all about Lando Norris. And let us not forget that Oscar is there picking up some unbelievable, and he is probably one of the great teammates. When I'm looking at Red Bull and I'm thinking about what Checo's doing, which is a disappointment. We can talk about that later on. But at the same time, I think Piastri is an example to every young driver. Yeah. This is the epitome. This is exactly what you need to be doing. Service and care for your number one driver. And when he makes a mistake or something happens, dive in and take up the points. And that's exactly what he's doing.
Yeah, well, look, I think absolutely Oscar's definitely doing a great job in his second season of Formula One against one of the great talents in Lando. Where I sit in this, and I know that if you're McLaren, you're going, what Max did was unacceptable. If you're Red Bull, you'll say, well, look, this is racing. And McLaren will say, well, the stewards gave Max a penalty, therefore they agree that what he did was wrong. I think that on stewarding and jumping back, actually doing an EJ and jumping back to Oscar, I think that was very harsh to get a penalty ahead of the main Grand Prix, because track limits in 6 and 7 is not the same as what we've seen in 9 and 10, and that's what frustrates me, that we apply certain letter of the rule book in certain corners, but in other corners we let it fly. Which just is inconsistent. I think the drivers should be more involved in agreeing collectively where they think track limits should be imposed and not, and that takes it off the stewards. Coming back to the Max and Lando thing, I think the final accident between them could have been avoided. I get Lando's point about Max moving after he's moved, and that is something that Max needs to be careful on, because the rules on moving under braking is quite clear. But I think it's the growing pains of those two buddies learning how to race wheel to wheel. And picking up on your point, going in the ring with a beer, it's a little bit like the old classic expression, taking a knife to a gunfight. If you go up against a Max, in the same way if you went up against a Senna, in the same way if you went up against a Schumacher, you didn't take the knife. You had to take the gun to that one. So it's brilliant in terms of it's giving us so much entertainment. It's giving us talking points, and it sets us up perfectly to go towards the British Grand Prix. But before we do, we've got to talk about George. I think he positioned himself fantastically over the weekend, made sure he was best of the rest, made sure he was, in terms of where he lined up on the grid, made sure he was in front of his teammate again. He did everything he could to make sure he could capitalise on an incident. So in that respect, he thoroughly deserved. He kept reflecting, going, it was a lucky win. Well, yes, but he was in, he got to be in it to win it. He positioned himself to be lucky.
Well, no surprise there. DC, of the 13 that you won, they were all extremely lucky anyway. So, and
I dominated those 13.
And I'd have to confess that most people would say the ones that we won. You've got to be lucky in life. And I am a lucky person, as indeed you are. And George mustn't do himself down, because he was in the position to take that up. And full marks to him. We shouldn't let the incident between Max and Lando cloud the position that George finds himself this morning, having won the Austrian Grand Prix. It was absolutely a titanic battle. You're absolutely right. He was out of the main frame of the TV for most of it until all the action happened after that last pit stop. And he put himself in an unbelievable position. And he was under pressure from Oscar as well. Let it not be, it wasn't a slam dunk that he was just going to cruise home to a victory. He had to fight for it too.
So brilliant victory for George, and great to see Mercedes show that they've been able to bring themselves back into a position to have their driver pick up that victory. Still question marks over Lewis. He's being out-qualified week in, week out. Other than the Barcelona race weekend, where there was flashes of what we're used to from Lewis, fighting, overtakes and all the good stuff. There was that little mistake. Mistakes are easy to happen, but he got that penalty for crossing the pit lane entry. But I think I hold Lewis in such high esteem that you almost don't expect mistakes like that. So where do you think he's at? Is this kind of like Michael at the end of his career when he was at Mercedes, where he was great but not as great as he was? Or is this just he's mentally off at Ferrari and it's a case of checking off the races at Mercedes?
I don't think you could ever say that Lewis would ever just tick off the races, so to speak. He wouldn't be going through... He is doing exactly, I think, in his mindset as what he did in winning championships before. Do I think he will up his game when he goes to Ferrari? I do actually believe he will. So why is he not doing it at Mercedes? And, you know, it's only a race ago that we saw somewhat of a semi-scurrilous email from one disgruntled supposed member of staff, which I absolutely doubt that had ever happened. So there's a lot going on.
So just to expand on that, there was an email that went round to a large group of journalists, basically. It was a conspiracy theory saying that Lewis was being hindered in some way by the team to help promote George.
Tire temperatures and blankets and stuff. That's absolute
I personally
nonsense.
think that's nonsense. But why would someone do that, and why would they think that?
Honestly, I cannot imagine. First of all, when you're a team and when you're actually in the fight, different as a driver in many respects because you're thinking primarily about yourself first. Whereas a team, you're actually thinking of the total number of points that you're going to leave the track with, not just with one, but the total number. And to assume that you can get all the points that you need with one driver and not with both is just ludicrous. So it doesn't hold any water with me. I dismissed it as being some crackpot and some loony that just put an email out there. And it was, if it was that good, why not put your name to it? You know, it was anonymous. And I'm always scary about
behind
that.
Others.
Yeah, well, of course. Anyway, let's move on because Lewis, he has a job to do. He's got to really start convincing the people at Ferrari that really they made this big decision to axe Carlos Sainz in favour of Lewis Hamilton. And not everyone agrees with that at the moment. And I'm sure Carlos himself probably doesn't agree with it more especially because he's trying to say, well, I haven't done anything wrong. I know I'm going at the end of the year, but I'm still fighting my corner here. And he's able to get podiums and he's already won a Grand Prix and we know what he's able to do. And sometimes there's flashes of brilliance from Ferrari, but some other times it's pretty appalling. Now, that's the problem with Ferrari. It's up and down. So it's not going to be easy for Lewis going forward.
Actually, that just suddenly a thought's come into my head that I hadn't considered at all when you mentioned Carlos Sainz and the talk about where's he going. Alpine apparently have come into the running now that friend of yours, Flavio Briatore has now joined there as an executive advisor. We'll come to him in a moment. Williams have gone all in saying that they want him. Audi, of course, would like him alongside Nico Hülkenberg. But I'm actually thinking, would Carlos be better saying to Ferrari, okay, I'll be your reserve driver for the next 2 years? Because he's got to imagine that Lewis isn't going to go a third year. So 2 years observing, getting fit, having a little mental break from Formula One. And then at 32, he would be then to come in with a car that's been developed with Lewis and Charles and pick it up then. That could give him world championships. Can he get a world championship at Alpine in the next 3 years? Can he get that at Williams in the next 3 years? Can he at Audi in the next 3 years?
Well, the answer clearly in our so-called information as we have to hand as of now, you would say no. And we've seen where Williams is... as much as they're making strides, at the end of the day, they're kind of anchored, so to speak, to where they are in the championship for the last 3-4 years. So to see, people don't go from last on the grid up to first in the grid. It just doesn't happen. So it's a gradual thing and it moves up the scale. So from my point of view is, I like that theory. I'm still very friendly, as indeed I'm sure you are, with Carlos Sr. And there's odd times that we talk and see what would you do and what would he do. And I'm of the same view, and that is that, still a concern to me. Carlos Sr. is a Red Bull driver, won so many Paris-Dakars. Remember, Carlos Jr. started off as a Red Bull driver. So would it not be better for him to go in as a reserve driver at Red Bull? Because that's the more obvious one. how long can Red Bull continue with Checo in the current situation? I mean, think about that, because at the moment, what is the championship in terms of constructors? Because that's where the real money is, guys. They are fighting for the constructors. They don't really care about the drivers' championship. Yes, it's important for the credibility, etc., for the driver, but it's the constructors. So Checo is something that we should talk about later on in the programme, because that's an issue as well.
Let's do it right now, because I think you're right. Checo, he's one of the most liked guys in the paddock, keeps himself to himself. We know he's been a Grand Prix winner. He was sort of one of the great conservationists back in the early days of Pirelli. He could make tyres last and go the distance. But as the sport's evolved, that has become less important.
Sure.
And he seems to be a little bit at sea with how to get the best out of this car. And that is not where he's battling right now with Hülkenberg, and who did a great job, by the way, and well done Haas to get both their drivers in the points. How does he get out of that rut? Right, put yourself back in team principal mode. How long would you leave him in that situation, assuming he doesn't improve? And what would you do to try and help him in the meantime?
Well, first of all, I think Christian is giving him the maximum help, or the team is giving him the maximum help. But you say and I say the same thing. The clock never lies. I might lie, David. You might even lie.
I don't even think it's a might.
David, we could lie on occasions, but the stopwatch doesn't lie. And when you are a second slower than your teammate in effectively the same car, same tyres.
Never happened.
It just doesn't happen, does it? It's just not there. And I'm really concerned. Yes, Checo brings great money from Carlos Slim and a whole lot of host of Mexican drivers, and I hope he's able to up his game. But, if I was the boss and if I was Christian Horner, I'd be saying to Checo this morning, Checo, you've got 2 races. You've got Silverstone coming up and another one after that, and if you can't make significant improvements into where you are qualifying and helping the team to win the Constructors' Championship, I'm going to have to replace you. So you give him chance. It's a bit brutal, but I remember saying that, 30 years ago perhaps, to Ralf Schumacher. I said, Ralph, it was at the time when points stopped at the top 6. I said, if you don't score points here this weekend, Max, or Ralph, your history. It's adios, goodbye. It was nice knowing you, but you're no good to me. Bye-bye. And do you know what happened? He scored the point. So he
was
stayed
a glutton for punishment.
No,
I'm saying with you, I would have gone out and crashed the car.
Nice guys don't win anything. That's the problem. And Checo is a nice guy. And can you imagine him? Can you imagine Checo in Lando's position last week, for example? He should have been fighting with Max, but he's not. I never will. I never could. Because Max has it all sewn up, and Max wants him in the team, which is and of course, if anyone has to consider, Max has a fair bit of say as to who his teammate is, and that's very clear that he would prefer Checo in there than he would with Carlos Sainz in there. So that's another issue. However, no one person is greater than the team, and that applies the same to Max as well. And for me, yes, give him 2 races, and if it doesn't happen in 2 races, then it's all on.
Well, that wonderfully triggers a thought in my mind about no one person being bigger than the team. We haven't heard any updates on your client, Adrian Newey. You're his manager. He has been revered. I'm one that bow down to his brilliance, his technical ability, having driven with them or driven in cars that he's been involved in through Williams, McLaren, and of course Red Bull. He's sort of gone off on a holiday right now. So
that's exactly what he has done, and that's what he should do.
And so let me ask the question, who have you been in the meantime talking to, and when are we getting an announcement on his future?
Well, first of all, mind your own business.
This is for the listeners, never mind me.
Listeners
I don't
will
care.
appreciate that there are certain times that you learn to zip up and shut the fuck up.
When did you learn that?
A long time ago. Anything to do with relationships, anything to do with privy and proper things of your client. I've made it very clear, and Adrian's made it clear. He will make that decision, and anyone who is on Instagram will see him and Amanda and the dogs in an open car in the south coast of UK, driving around all weekend. Did he watch the Grand Prix? I probably would have had it. May have watched you on Channel 4, DC, but I doubt if he was there for the actual Grand Prix itself. So he's relaxing. He has a job to do. He is completing the design on the RB17 for those anchors out there. It's the road car version, which is unbelievable car.
Yours for $6 million?
And
yours for £6 million?
well, I thought it was 5. When did you put it up just to take your cut, or what?
I just assumed you put the number up, so I didn't want.
I would do if I could, but anyway. Anyway, 5 or 6, what's $1 million between friends? But anyway, the reality is that it'll be a sensational car. And Harry, his son, is involved in the selling of that and works for Red Bull on that area. So I applaud Adrian because he is actually saying nothing. And any conversation that I may have with Adrian is private. And so, DC, don't even ask, because I'm not going to tell you, and mind your own goddamn business.
I think I'll just give Adrian a call after the podcast. He'll tell me. Right, moving along to other greats of the sport. Controversial as well, Flavio Briatore.
Yeah.
Unquestionably someone that moved the dial when he arrived at Benetton many years ago. Famously had made calls very early in his career that we need less money spent on all this technology and more on the entertainment, because he understood, he was a marketing man, the power of that. He's been called back as an executive advisor to the Alpine team, which formerly was Renault, and then before that was Benetton. He's got presence. When he walks in the paddock, he's a friend of ours. We see him around. I get it. I get why having somebody who's a people reader, that's what I think he is. He's not a technical man. You're not a technical guy. You've understood driving and you've understood how to do the numbers and run a business. But none of us, I think, would claim to understand how to put together a differential or a gearbox. And he definitely wouldn't. But if you look at his other businesses, he understands what he sees in people's eyes and what he feels where they should be within an organisation. So that's an asset to Alpine.
First of all, I think 1990, 1991, when Jordan started, the person I fought with most in my early years was Flavio. But the person I loved most was Flavio. The person I enjoyed going out to dinner with most was Flavio. So there was a love-hate relationship, which is often the great signs of great love affairs.
He claims to barely know you.
That may be the case. I absolutely adore him. He has a presence in abundance. Like it's like confetti or magic dust. You just see suddenly the cameras that were on a racing driver, for example, and they're all rushing around to the other side because Briatore has made an entrance. And I'll tell you a little story. It was a very funny thing. Maybe years and years ago, when you went to Sardinia, of course, Porto-Cervo, where the Billionaire Club first started, which was Flavio's club. And at 12 o'clock midnight, you'd have this fanfare, big, long red carpet. And this guy chaired in by 4 muscly men, and he's sitting up on a throne with a crown on his head. I mean, it was the most bizarre thing you could ever imagine.
The music was Flavio.
No, but it was the music, it was Flavio, and then the flares that were going up and thing. And myself, I was there with Fisichella. So it was at the time, it must have been 97 or whenever it was. And Maria and I and Fisichella, we were sitting on a boat and we'd been invited by Flavio. And that is the epitome of this guy. He loves personal adoration. He went out with Naomi Campbell. He went out with this girl and that girl. He had...
Actually, just on that, sorry to jump across you, Eddie, with your train of thought. Because he had the ability to have his ex-wife and 4 of his girlfriends, former girlfriends, including Heidi Klum, Naomi Campbell and others, on his boat during this year's Monaco Grand Prix. If that is not a sign of a master negotiator and people person, I don't know what is.
Well, the only thing I can suggest do you know why that could happen? Because he's a gentleman. Let us not forget that.
Yes.
Let's not your memory run away with yourself.
Okay. Well, let's leave it on that particular. He's a gentleman. We're all gentlemen. Right. Just a quickie on a few contract extensions. Pierre Gasly at Alpine and Lance Stroll. I guess least surprising is the Lance Stroll news at Aston. Gasly seems to me like that's the right place for him, given the options he's got. It's still a works team, talented driver. we wait to see what happens with Ocon?
I'm sad. DC. I'm still trying to get to the bottom. Maybe you might be able to help us. But Esteban Ocon has, in his lifetime, not done anything, in my opinion, anything wrong or bad. But suddenly he's come away with a bit of a reputation, things he said inside Alpine, which was pathetic at the beginning of the year, both from an aero point of view and from overweight point of view. I mean, scandalous to bring a car to the great racetrack with that amount of kilos and stuff like that was shocking. And no one should have allowed that to happen. But I remember him growing up in Force India, and I absolutely adored him. And I think there's very little between those two. And he's another Carlos Sainz, isn't he? He's suffered by being asked to resign, and he's leaving at the end of this current season. So where's he going to go? I don't know. Is he going to go to Williams? I don't know. It's a real problem about drivers in the current situation. We're talking about Ocon, we're talking about Carlos Sainz, but we're also talking about new drivers. And we're talking about, I look carefully at the Formula 2 race, for example, this weekend. And yes, there's some very big talents there. But with such other talents with Formula 1 experience, are you going to overlook the current crop of drivers like Sainz and Ocon in preference for a young rookie in Formula 2? Not for me. I wouldn't do it.
No, I think that you'd go for a safe pair of hands rather than the hope of cream tomorrow. Right, EJ, I know we could keep going, but we're going to be spending a lot of time together this week. So frankly, I need to pace myself. So we're going to wrap it up at this point. Listeners, as always, you can give us your thoughts by emailing ffs@whisper.tv, and you can follow us at F1 for Success, and by joining us in the FFS Club.
Ooh. Well done, David. You got
I got it out without my lisp and all the other bits and pieces. So, EJ, it's goodbye from me. Thank you to our listeners. And, well, EJ, let me put my fingers in my ears.
Well, before I do the growl, can I just say I am, in a way, very envious.
Do the growl.
Because
do the
just
growl.
A little thought about Gil here, and that is you're doing a magic thing today. And Gil de Ferran, you will be forever in our minds and in our thoughts. We loved you and your family so much. And I'm going to this little growl is for you, Angie. And it comes from the bottom of my heart.
On that basis, I have to love the growl. Well done, EJ.